get your hands dirty with what we're going to do today. And actually, so yeah, you can get your hands dirty with, what we are going to do today related to creating Angular libraries, and actually go from here learning, how you can get started with an Angular application if you don't know that already, and get started with creating an Angular library, even if it's a simple library, does a simple job, and then publish it to NPM, or just give it to your friends or colleagues to be, to have them be able to use it, right? So a quick question to all of you, is anybody coding along with me?
I personally am. Anyone else? So don't look at this as a hard thing.
Yeah,
So
sure.
the point is just follow along. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Kevin. Go ahead.
All right, so I take it to be yes, and I assume that everybody is coding with me. So I think I'll get started by sharing my screen now, and let me know, give me a heads up when you can actually see my screen. Oops, Twitter here. Let's cancel that. Right. So please let me know if you can see my screen now.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so yes, thanks for the introduction, Wayne. And I'm going to introduce myself again. But yeah, we're going to talk about building libraries with Angular today, and not just talk about it, because otherwise you won't believe me as a programmer, right? So we'll be actually coding how to build a library with Angular, and we'll also publish it to NPM if time allows. So to start, a bit about myself. I work as an engineer at a company called the DataWorks, and I'm also a Microsoft MVP and a Google developer expert in web technologies. So I love writing code blogs, code labs, blogs related to Angular and other web technologies. I'm mainly into, like, most of my focus is on React and Angular frameworks of JavaScript. And yeah, that's what we do, web developers, right? Switching between frameworks, trying to build something useful, architect something, etc. So yeah, that's pretty much about myself. And we're going to start off with understanding what a library basically means, and from the programmatic definition of it. And then we'll jump to what Angular libraries are for, why do we need Angular libraries at all, and so on. So to start, the first term that we see when we think of libraries is that this is definitely something to reusability, right? Because that's the reason of creating a library, exporting it, giving to somebody else. This basically means that there is some piece of code which you're trying to share with others so that it helps them also, or maybe there is some code that's written and it's over the internet and you want to use them. And we as developers definitely know that libraries are a savior for us in many of the in most of what we do, right? Like I would use a lot of libraries if that doesn't hamper the performance of my application. And we do use libraries on a daily basis in our projects, maybe a small project or maybe an enterprise level project. So yes, let's first understand the definition in programming of what libraries are. And it says here, as you can see, that libraries are basically a collection of pre-compiled routines that a program can use. Now, there seems to be some words which we would like to break down. So let's understand it, let's break it into pieces and then try to understand this. So it says that a library is a collection of pre-compiled routines. What does that mean? So this gives me a hint that a library is something that, there is some code which is already generated, or maybe it's built and it does the function that it's supposed to do. And this is a repeating code, that this is a code that you can use in multiple applications, multiple programs. And this is something that's going to help you with the reusability. This is something that's gonna solve some purpose inside your application, but not just this application, but it might be able to help you in many other applications. So that's kind of a gist of what libraries help you with. And if we look at the Angular way of the entities that come into picture, the terms that come into the picture are, a library can contain components, it can contain modules of code. Then the main thing about library is the shareable feature, right? The code should be shareable so that you're able to solve the purpose of a particular program, of a particular team, of a particular project. So that's what shareable code means here. Reusable functionality, that's the main thing about a library. You should be able to reuse this library, and it should not be specific to, maybe just a framework or maybe just a project. For example, there is one component, slider component, right? And then there's this other component which is called a color picker component. Now you have this library which contains all these components, but it's built only with one framework. Now, are you sure that you would want to create it in a way that only your project can use it and no other project can use it? That's not very smart, right? So you would want to build it in a way that even if you don't want to share it with the whole world, even if you don't want to publish it to NPM, even if you don't want to share it with your colleague, you have it for yourself. You build it in a way that it's reusable, and the next time you're working on a project and you come across something similar, a similar requirement, for example, then you would recall that, okay, there's this slider component that I built for a library inside a library, and that's something that I can reuse here. So that's where why libraries come into picture. That's why libraries are very helpful, and that's why you see that there are multiple libraries out there, and it's not just NPM package manager. You would see, when you're working with Rust programming language, for example, you would see caret, which are the different packages, right? So we call it packages when we are dealing with NPM. We would call it caret when we are dealing with Rust programming language. So different names, but so many libraries out there. All right, so it also says that a library has a dedicated code for a particular feature, and we have already discussed that a library has this bundled code which has some purpose that it's trying to solve, and that's what it shares with whoever it's trying, the library is solving the purpose for. Maybe it's just yourself. All right, so, and I really found this image very interesting when it comes to explaining libraries, and I found this in a talk by Yuri, where he was talking about creating and publishing Angular libraries like a pro, and he mentioned how an Angular application comprises of different Angular libraries or JavaScript libraries. It can be any external libraries that you're trying to use, and you can build something, some application really big with all these tools assembled together. It can be Angular libraries, it can be just an Angular component if you're not talking about libraries. It can be an external library. It could be, for example, material UI that you use, right? Or it can be Angular material which you want to use. All these libraries help you to collate things together, bring things together, and build an awesome application, right? So moving on. So there's this document which I'll talk about a little bit later, but the document says that a library is the smallest set of logically connected code. Let's go back here. Now this is very important to understand, in bits and pieces. So it says it's the smallest set of logically connected code. So there's a lot of code that has some purpose, a dedicated feature that it's trying to provide, and all of that is logically connected, bundled well, and it's the smallest set that you can make, that you can build, and the purpose of it is to, maybe just solve some functionality, for example. Just take the example of styling components, for example, right? So the document is called Angular package format, and we'll let's keep it for a bit later because we'll talk about it a bit later now. So let's first look at what all are the requirements of a library, how a library should be, or let me call it how an Angular library should be, right? So the very important first thing is that a library should be platform independent, because if it's not platform independent, it kind of like, half-heartedly solves our purpose, not fully. We really need a library to be platform independent. It should work with Angular Universal, or it should, work with web workers, right? So that's the first step. A library should be platform independent, and it should be bundled and distributed. We should bundle our library well, so we are able to distribute that. The next thing is it should be AOT compilation ready. Now, before a few versions of Angular, if we go back a few versions, then we would have to ensure that a library is AOT compilation ready. But now that we have the new versions of Angular, it is quite ensured that our library will be AOT compilation ready, right? Because we have that built in now. And this is the document I was talking about, and it always excites me when I talk about this document, the Angular package format document. You would know the reason soon why I like this, this document so much. So this is the perfect documentation which you will find related to how a library should be built, how the different Angular packages should be distributed to ensure that your library, your code that you write to make it an Angular library integrates seamlessly with the whole Angular application, any consuming application, an Angular application, and not just yours. So this is really interesting, and I have this link here which I'll quickly share with you. Or okay, you can I'll share these slides later, so you can pick it up from here and have a look at the Angular package format document. And one more important thing to notice here is that all the Angular packages that we use, Angular router and Angular material, all are built using this Angular package format. So it ensures that our library also is built following all those standards, following all those conventions, so that when we are trying to integrate our library with an existing Angular application, it shouldn't be very difficult compatibility wise, right? So the compatibility will be taken care of when you use and create your library using the Angular package format. And these are some things that Angular package format, it's also called APF document. So it takes care of the module definitions if they're defined properly. It takes care of it would create the metadata file of the AOT ready, the bundle that you create. Then it would specify the entry point for your library, and it would also create the typing files. Now, I understand all of these terms are quite ununderstandable. We don't understand them really well, but when we actually code, we'll come across each one of these. Moving on, the steps to create a library, right? Now, this is very important to understand that whenever we are creating a bundle of anything, whenever we are trying to distribute anything after we create as a library or a web component, for example, you would notice that it's always better to keep your code, all the business logic and the UI side of it, or the styles related to it, inside one file. So you would prefer to inline all the templates and the styles. You would not want to, keep a different file for HTML, keep a different file for the, styling, which is either whichever styling framework that you choose, CSS, SCSS, or any other thing, right? So the first step is to inline all the templates and the styles. The next step that happens in the process of creating a library is compiling it, right? So you use the ng-c compiler to be able to compile your library in the creation process. And once you do that, you would have different build formats that would be created for your library. And you can see here, you would have the ESM 2015 bundle, which is also ES6. Then you would have ESM5 bundle, which is actually a combination of ES5 and the imports and exports feature of ES6. So you'll get the imports exports from ES6, but you'll have all the other configurations and the features of ES5. And then you would have the UMD format, which is the combination of AMD and CommonJS modules that we used to use a lot earlier. So yeah, now there's a catch here. With Angular 10 coming in, we don't anymore have ESM5 bundles, and that's deprecated. So we would have two different types of bundles now, the ESM 2015 bundles and the UMD bundles. And the other interesting thing to notice here is that we would also have the flat bundles. I'll talk about it a bit later. So let's go on. And if I'm moving a bit faster, do let me know, but the idea is to finally get to code, because I've given this talk before and I'm really interested to finally get to the code and actually have you code along with me. So as you might have seen in the previous slide here, this seems to be a lot of tasks. I'll have to inline all the templates. I'll have to inline all the styles. I'll have to look at the compilation process. I'll have to, understand the whole compilation process first, so that I'm able to compile it using the ng-c compiler. There might be a lot of scripts that I have to write. And then you would have to take care of all the build formats which are created. Now, since this is a lot of tasks, right, there is a utility that helps us do that. And that utility is ng-packagr. Now, this was a library that was built by, this was a tool that was built by David, and it allows libraries to be built and packaged using just one command. The idea is to create libraries in the Angular package format. So all these things that I'm talking about next is what ng-packagr allows us to do. Number one, It creates libraries in the Angular package format. So it will it will take care of the typing files, of the AOT ready metadata file, and it would create all the bundles, which is ESM 2015, ESM5, and the UMD bundle. It would also create the type definitions for us, which is great. We don't have to do that separately. We don't have to create any d.ts files separately. It creates the AOT metadata file. Again, ng-packagr does that. You don't have to do that in the process. And the best part, the best part is that you don't have to go manually and inline all the templates, or you also don't have to use the flag to inline the template using the Angular CLI. The ng-packagr does that for you. Inside your application, whenever you're creating a library, ng-packagr would do that for you. Now, the next question that might be coming in your mind is that do we have ng-packagr available as a tool to us, or how do we use it? Do we download it as a dependency? Do we install it as a dependency and then do it, or what? And a great news here is that ng-packagr is actually integrated with the CLI. So after Angular 7, I believe, Angular 7, ng-packagr was integrated with the CLI. Here. Yeah. So now ng-packagr works under the hood behind Angular CLI, and whenever you create the library using ng-generate command, just like all the other ng-generate commands, you would have ng-packagr running in the background and doing all these tasks for you that you see here. So you don't have to use it as a separate tool. Now, like I was talking before, you would also have the FESM5 and the FESM 2015 bundles, which are the flat files for your bundles. We'll also have a look at those. Now, this is what the ng-packagr file mainly looks like. Whenever you have ng-packagr integrated in your application, you would notice this file, which is the ng-packagr.json file. And this basically contains the entry file to your library, which is kind of the face to your library. For example, this is the consuming application, right? And then there's this other library. Now, how does the library interact with the consuming application? What is the face? What is the, connect? You call it a bridge, right? So what is the bridge between the consuming application and the library? That's the public API TS file. That's the face of your library. That's where you specify whatever you're trying to export from your library to the consuming application. So moving on, you can see here, this is the public API.ts file, and you can see how I'm exporting the component or the module, whichever I want to, from the library. And these are the things that our consuming application will be able to use. So public API.ts file contains that. Now, as you can see, the consuming application holds all of these values. It would import whatever module and component you're trying to use from the library. Moving on, if you see here, this is kind of the whole process. You have the library file, something called as public API.ts file. You have all the component.ts files, module.ts file, and then this packet.json. This is your library files. So it goes through the ng-packagr, and what does it do to your files? I mean the library files. It would run them, and it will transform that all to your Angular package format way of files. It will create the d.ts files. It will have your packet.json, and it will create all the bundles that your library needs to have, the ones that we talked about, ESM5, ESM 2015, and the UMD bundles, right? And now we know that with Angular 10, we don't anymore have ESM5 bundles. Now, just like we have all the other schematics to be, to be able to generate anything, for example, ng-generate component, ng-generate service. Similarly, we have ng-generate library, and you can give the name of the library here. So using the CLI, you can just simply create the library, and you don't have to do any other, things like inlining the styles or creating a public API.ts files. All of that is done by using this schematic when you're telling the CLI that I want to create a library, I want to generate a library, and that uses ng-packagr behind the hood. Okay, so now all of this in my slides here is a lot of code related stuff. So I kept it just for for you to have it in the slides. But let's go ahead and start the code now. And there's one very interesting thing that I want to do before we start coding, and that is I would like to share the link with you all, so that you can follow me along when I'm actually doing this session, so that when you miss out on anything, you can, just look at this article here that I have written. It's like a step-by-step guide to creating your first library in Angular, and you would be able to follow it from here. And please ask me in between if you have any questions related to, the process that we are following, whoever is coding along. So Wayne, just one question in between. How can I share this link?
Okay, because this is neat. If you're just on Twitter, you can just share with me the link on Twitter, and then I can just tweet it under the account so that everyone can just get it.
All right. Okay. So let's do that quickly. Okay. Who opens Twitter in between a talk? I'm doing that.
Special cases.
All right. So here goes the link, and you can share it with everyone. Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you.
So yeah, you can see here that right. So all of the steps that I'll be following while creating the library are mentioned here. And whenever you don't understand me when I'm actually doing this, or am I maybe I'm a bit faster when I'm doing this, just go through this. And even then, if you don't understand, stop me in between, ask me, because I really want this to be a code along session so we can pair program. All right, so let's close this, go to the terminal quickly. Right. The first step is to create a workspace, right? So what you have usually seen, let me close this, just minimize this and open this here. Right. So the first step is to create a workspace. So I would go inside the folder that I need to go in. Let's clear this. Right. Inside this folder, I want to create a new application. Do I want to create a new Angular application? I actually don't need to, right? Because the idea is to just create a library. I don't even need to have an Angular application. So first thing is to create an Angular workspace. I need to have a workspace where I'll create my library. So just like you do ng new and the name of your application, whatever application that you use, you can just give the name to the workspace. Let's call it ng Kenya. Let's just call it Angular Kenya, right? And the flag that we pass here is very important. Now this is very important to notice. I'll let's see if I can increase the size a wee bit. Right. So right. Yeah, so the flag here is create application equals to false, because the idea is that I just want to have a Angular workspace, but I don't really want to create a new application, create a new Angular application. Let's just make it a bit bigger. Right. So now you can see that we'll have a project created as Angular Kenya. This will be the name of our Angular workspace, and it won't create an Angular application for you. So you might see that it doesn't look very familiar as an Angular application looks like. You would not have the src folder, and you would not have all your component files, service files, etc. It will not even ask, the CLI won't even ask you about do you want to add Angular routing to your application. So if you've seen those CLI prompts when you're creating an Angular application, you know what I'm talking about. All right, so we have created Angular Kenya workspace here, and let's just go inside that quickly. Okay, right. So let's check what's inside that. We see that okay, we have some things in there. So let's quickly open that inside the code and see what is in there. Right, so you see we don't really have any src folder as such, or we don't have any files related to any components or any application related stuff. But what we do have is the package.json, which contains all the dependencies for the application. And we also have all the tsconfig, the compiler config, the TypeScript configurations, and tslint files, all the extra files that we need. So you can see we have the Angular JSON here. Now, what do we need to create first? We need to create a library. So let's go back to the terminal, and I want to tell the terminal that we want to create an Angular library. So comes back the schematic, right? So we go ahead and do ng-generate library in this case, and the library name. Let's call it ng-lib. Just let's keep it in small case. Yeah, so my library will be called ng-lib. I've created it using ng-generate library and ng-lib. That's the name of my library. So it asks me that do you want to, under the Google's privacy policy. So I'll just go ahead and say yes. And let's just expand this a bit so that we can have a look at all the files that are getting created. And yeah, as you can see, now when I created the Angular library, it seems to have created a project, a folder called projects, and inside that all my file, library related files are created. Now this is very important. Whenever we generate any application or library inside an empty workspace, that would be inside the projects folder here. So in this case, it's a library. You can also have your Angular application or multiple Angular applications inside this project folder. So yeah, this is what your library looks like. And now you have the library code in here. Now let's go back to the terminal quickly and try to understand what all files it is generating for us. So you can see some mandatory files like the readme file and the ng-packagr.json. Now, does it interest you a little bit, ng-packagr.json? I feel that this is something related to the ng-packagr. That is something that we just talked about, which works under the CLI and creates all the stuff for us in the Angular package format. So yeah, as you can see here, this is the ng-package.json file, which is the configuration for our ng-packagr, and this is where we specify the entry file for our library. You can obviously change it as per your need if you want to give it a different name for your library, but by default you have the public api.ts file, which is the entry file to your application, to your library, I should say. Yeah, that's about the ng-package.json. Then let's have a look at package.json. And do you notice that you have two package.json files in your application now, not just one? One package.json is the root package.json, which is containing all the dev dependencies, the dependencies, etc. And then there's this library package.json, which is basically containing the information about your library, the name of your library, the version of your library, any peer dependencies of your library, in this case only these two, and then the dependencies that your library is using. So let's go forward and see. And these are the the general files which are always created. In this case, it would not be tsconfig.json, but it would be tsconfig.lib.prod.json or just tsconfig.lib.json, because this is the tsconfig of our library, right? And it contains all, again, the TypeScript related configuration or the compiler options here. Now, when we go into the src folder, which is the main thing for us to understand our library, that's when you would see that many different files are in here. You would see that you have the public api.ts file, which, if you remember from before about what I was talking about, public api.ts file, this is the face of your Angular library, right? So, and as you can see here, I'm exporting three basic files from here. I'm exporting the library service. There's a service that I've created in my library, and there's a component that I've created in my library, and there's a module that I've created inside my library. And all of these things are something that I'm trying to export and give it to the user, giving to the consuming application, whoever is trying to use my library. So this is what I export here. In case you don't want to give the whole module to the user, just don't export it, right? You just want that from your library, this particular user should have only this component access from this library. So if they're using this library Angular Kenya, or the library name is ng-lib, they would have access to only the component from this library and nothing else. So, but remember that you'll have to export the component from the module to ensure that the component is accessible, right? So yeah, let's just go back. All right. Then let's go to the lib folder, which is again very important to understand. And as you see that now this looks something familiar. We have a lot of code files, we have component files, we have module files, we have service file, right? So ng-lib.component.ts, this is the main component that our library has. And as you can see, I didn't inline these templates, but it's already inlined. Who did that for us? ng-packagr, using the Angular package format. So the template is now inlined, the style is inlined, and we have this one file for our component and one test file, obviously, if you're writing any tests for your library. So yeah, we would have component.ts, we would have component.spec.ts. Similarly, we would have one module, which is the container for our component declaration or the service declaration. and this is what our ng-lib module looks like. And then if you want to use service inside your application for maybe any HTTP operations or any communication among your components, that's when you can use the ng-lib.service.ts. All these files are generated by default by your when you do ng generate from the Angular CLI. So you can obviously get rid of these if you wish to. If you don't want to have even a service inside your library and just keep it very simple, that's when you can use just the component and the module inside your library. So I feel I've explained kind of the whole the structure of what a library contains. So let's go to the component now, and we want to keep it our version of the library that we'll be building and publishing it to NPM. So it says ng-lib works. That's not very exciting. Let's just say here hello from Angular Kenya, right? So this is what we want to publish from our library for now. Only this, because we are just doing a demo, and you can have multiple complex features inside your libraries, which helps the developers out there. So yeah, let's just save it. Our library now says that hello from Angular Kenya. And a component selector here is lib ng-lib. So this is something that we'll be able to use it later in whichever consuming application we try to get this in, import this in. So yeah, this is our library. Now let's assume that our library is ready. We have written all the code that our library needs, and finally we are ready to build our library. When it comes to building our library, the first thing is to write a script for it, so that we can just use npm run to build our script and create our build our library. So let's go to the package.json. An important thing to notice here is that I'm actually going to the root package.json and not the library package.json. So let's go to the root package.json here. Inside the scripts, I'll just specify the build script here. So let's call it build lib, and let's just give it the script ng-build and the name of my library, which is ng-lib, right? So this is the script that helps me build my library. And now that we have the script ready, let's quickly go copy this from here, go to the terminal, and finally build our library, right? So what do we do next? npm run and the name of the script name, right, that I've given just now in the package.json. So it seems to be very simple until now. Please shoot questions if you have any. I would love to get those. You can convey those to Wayne can convey those to me. So yeah, npm run and the build script. This command should now run the build of my library, whatever small library that I have right now. It will build that. So let's run this now and let's see what happens. It's important to notice what all files are generated or converted into something. So it runs the script ng-build ng-lib, and then now let's look at this, which is very interesting here. It starts building the Angular package. It says that it's not recommended to publish IV libraries to NPM repositories. So as of yet, it's not recommended to publish the IV libraries, which comes with Angular 10, to NPM repositories. But for those of you who know that we have the Angular roadmap out now, we know that we are soon going to be able to publish IV libraries to NPM. Awesome. The next thing that we see here is that it builds an entry point for our ng-lib, for our library, and it does the it compiles the TypeScript sources through this compiler, which we talked about earlier. Remember ngc from the time of ng-packagr that we were talking about? So now CLI does that for you in the build process. It compiles all the bundles, like the ES 2015 bundle as ESM 2015, and all the flat bundles, the UMD bundle. It minifies the UMD bundle and to create a flat bundle of that. So yeah, it has built our library, and you can see the new location of our build folder, which is inside the dist folder, and then inside the library name. So let's go back to our code and have a look at the build library. Let's close this to avoid confusion. Yeah, so as you can see, inside the dist folder, we have the name of our library, and we have all the different bundles here, and the public api.d.ts file, which is the typing file that ng-packagr creates for you now, which earlier we would have to create ourselves. So this is the typing file, which is again containing all the things that we are exporting from our library to the consuming application. In this case, one service, a component, and a module. Now there's one more package.json. Now this is really important to understand that inside your whole application, you would or I should say the workspace, you would have 3 package.jsons. One, the root package.json. Second, the library package.json. And the third one is the built libraries package.json. So 3 in all, and do not confuse because 3 of those has a very different purpose. Let's look at the third package.json. Now, the built library, the package of our library that is built contains all the links, to the main bundle and the flat bundles and the ESM 2015 bundle here, and all, the typing file that we have for our library, the name of our library, the version, the peer dependencies, etc. This is the built libraries package.json. So let's close this. Let's look at the ng-lib.p.ts file. This is where you just specify that whatever is the face, whatever is inside your public API.ts file, that's what you get from there. And we saw that what all do we get from here? All these 3 different files. Now moving to the packages, right? As you see, we don't have ESM, this bundle here. We have ESM 2015. And we have the flat bundle for that, but we do not have the ESM5 bundle, right? ES5 bundle. We don't have that because the version that I'm using here is Angular 10, NGV. Right. So as you can see, I'm using the Angular version 10. So we don't have the ESM5 bundle, and that's deprecated now. But we do have ESM 2015. And let's close this. We have the flat bundle for ESM 2015. You can see this is the minified file in here. Sorry. Yeah. Then you would see that we have the UMD bundles here as well, right? So all the minified UMD bundles and the 2015 bundles, right? So we have all the required bundles. Now, when we go to the library lib folder here, right, you can see all the typing files for 3 of your files. One for the service, then you would have it for the module, and you would have it for the component. So this is what the build package looks like now. Now that you have the build package ready, the next thing for you should be to be able to use your library, right? Now there are different ways that you can use your library. You have the package created for your library. I mean, you have the build folder created for your library, and now you can pack it and give it to anyone to be able to use it, right? Now you have 3 options again. Either you can just circulate this folder, I mean the package of it, or the next option is to put it somewhere, maybe inside an internal repository for your company or just for your colleagues, and then be able to use this library for your internal purposes. And the third option is publish it to NPM. Let the whole world use your library. They might enjoy the feature that you've written, right? So yeah, let's now pack our library and see how we'll be able to use it inside our application. So to pack our library, let's write another script here. Let's call it packlib. Right. And inside that, let's just give the command. So first of all, we need to go inside the library, the build folder, which is dist/ng-lib. We go inside that, and then we want to pack it, right? So let's call it use npm pack to do that. So packlib cd dist/ng-lib and add ampersand twice, and then you have npm pack. This is what helps you pack your library. So if you go inside the dist folder, this is what you'll create a package of and then be able to use it. So now let's go to the CLI, clear it again, go to the top, and right. So npm run packlib. Let's see what happens. And this was very fast because we have such a small library which just says hello from Angular Kenya. So yeah, you can see that it ran the command cd dist/ whatever is the name of our library, and it's trying to pack that. And as you can see, it takes all the contents from our library which it's trying to pack, and it creates a tgz file out of that. This tgz file is actually your package. This package is what you will publish to npm, or you'll publish to your internal repository, or you'll simply keep it as a local file and be able to use it in your multiple projects. So yeah, and you can see these name and the version that comes here comes from the name of your library, right? The package.json that contained the name of your library, the version of your library. Again, the versioning of your library is based on semantic versioning, and if you might have gotten the link to my blog that I've shared with you. In that, I've specified the link to semantic versioning also, or to just mention it here. It's SEM, SEM, VER, semware.org. So that gives you all the detail about what semantic versioning is, how do you follow major, minor, and patch versioning for your library. And then it also shows you the package size and the unpacked size here for your library. So let's just copy this package name for now, right? And let's go back to the code and have a look at the package. So you see, this is the package that is created for you inside the dist folder. Now that you have this package ready, now you would really like to use it, right? So you have two options again. Either you can create a new Angular application where you would want to, use and consume this the package that you just created, or the other option is that since this is an Angular workspace, right, but you don't have an Angular application here already, you can actually go ahead and create an Angular application inside this and be able to consume it inside the same workspace, right? So let's create an Angular application here quickly because we have the package ready. So let's do ng. Now you don't have to do ng new because you did that already when you were creating the workspace, but you simply need to generate an application. So let's call it ng generate app and the name of your app. Let's call it consumer, right? Because the idea, let's give it a literal meaning because the idea is to consume your library. So ng generate app and the name of the app. Let's see what happens. It should generate the app for our the workspace. That's when CLI will give you its prompt. Do you want to add Angular routing to your application? Let's just say yes. Styling that it asks, I simply want to go with SCSS for now. So you can see it has created all the familiar files to us Angular developers. We can see all the app components, SCSS, app component HTML, spec.ts file, .ts file, and environment.ts files, etc. Right? All these are the familiar files that we see inside an Angular application. So let's go to the Angular application now inside this workspace. So let me close this. Where is the SRC folder? Now that will be inside the projects folder, right? So you have two things in here now. One is your library project. Second is your Angular application project, which in this case is called Angular consumer. So yeah, let's go inside that. We can see we have this SRC folder here, which contains the very familiar files, app component HTML, app component TS. It's the default app that gets created when you create a new application. So let's just close this for now. The simple idea is to be able to use our library inside this application. So let's go ahead and install our library, right? So let's do NPM install, and we'll need to give the path to this, right? So the path is dist / the name of my library, which is ng-lib / the package name. So let's quickly recheck if this is all good. I want to install something from the dist folder, then from the ng-lib, which is the name of my library, and then this particular package name from here that we just packed and created, right? So yeah, the path to the package looks perfect. npm install this, and let's try to install it now. Wayne, are you able to code along? You can answer on behalf of everyone.
Yeah. I was just having some errors on my, I think it's the tsconfig.json.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm just having some red squigglies. I don't know why exactly, but I think I can just check in with you after you're done.
Sure. Is that something with the wrong configuration, or do you?
I'm not really sure. I think okay. I think I know why. Initially I think I didn't write the correct. I think it was like wasn't the correct library name, so I had to delete it again.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so, but it's okay now. Yeah.
Yeah, you can ask me later. All right.
Okay,
So
sure.
we can see that we have installed this package locally. We didn't we didn't publish it to NPM, but we have installed it locally inside our application. So the first thing that we do is go to the package.json, the root package.json, because that's where our library will get added. And this is where you can see you have your own library installed inside a consuming application. So you can see ng-lib, which is the name of your library, and the package name. Now, since you're doing it locally, you see this file : thing here before the name of your library and the path to your library. this basically means that it's coming from a local file and not from a, from the NPM or any package manager, right? So yeah, this basically means the file and colon basically means that this is a local file, and this denotes that you have your library inside your application now, consuming application now. And the simple idea now would be to be able to go to your consuming application, go inside app, and then the app module. Simply import the module that we were exporting from there. So let's keep it empty for now, from the name of your library, in this case, which is see by what name it comes. So let's just quickly copy it from our package.json, which is here. Let's see if only this works out. Should probably ng-lib, right? So you can see that we have this here, and now if it gives you the suggestion of the module name, this would mean that you have your library working here. The name of your component should be something like ng-lib component, ng-lib module, or ng-lib service. This is what you exported from your library, right? So this denotes that your library is inside your application and it's working well. Now this is one way of using this. The other way is to simply link it to NPM, and that way you don't have to install any library from NPM, and you can just link it from NPM, and it would reside on NPM, not inside your packet.json, but you're linking to that, so you're basically using it from there. So yeah, let's go back on here and look at the other option, which is to yeah, it's gone back. And let's also simply just delete this from here, because now the other option that we are looking at is the uploading and publishing it to NPM now, right? So let's go in here. The first step now, since we have the package ready, the first step now is to check if we are logged into NPM, right? So I will check NPM who am I. This means that if I'm logged in, NPM will simply give me my details, and if I'm not, it will not recognize me, and it will say please log in. So let's check. Right, so I'm logged in already, that's why it tells me that who am I. But if you want to log in, you can do npm login, and then you can enter your username, NPM username, and the password, and this will log you inside NPM, and that's when you will be able to publish your package to NPM. Now, since I'm already logged in, I'll not do this step. Let's go to the code first of all, and quickly see if there's anything left that we want to do. Now, NPM is a big place for all the libraries, right? And you would notice that most of the names that you give to your library are already either gone, somebody else has used them, or they're not simply available, right? And that's when you would prefer to use a workspace, and a workspace for your library. In this case, your account name will be your workspace. For example, let's go to our libraries package.json, which is where, let's close consumer. Let's open the package.json here, and you can see your library name is just ng-lib, and there can be multiple libraries with this name, right? So to keep it my own library and to give it a unique name, what I would do is that I would prepend it with the name of my account, NPM account, and then now this is my workspace. Inside this, whatever name is there would be my own library, so it can't conflict with any other library over the internet. Yeah, so this is the name of my library. The version here can be again, it can follow semantic versioning, but then since this will be the first version, let's just give it 1.0.0. Right, so you have this here, you have specified the new name for your library, and this is the new version of your library. It's the first version of your library. So now that you have configured it inside your packet.json, let's build our library again. So again, we use the npm run and the build lib, I believe that's what the name was, right? So we are building our library again, and as you can see, the entry point now contains this name, and it has built our library with this name. When we have that built, we would like to pack it again, right? So let's quickly go ahead and pack this library. npm run pack lib, and you see now the package name is something different. The package name is actually now the whole name of my library. which is Nishu Goel, which is my workspace name, and then the name of my library, and then whatever version my library has, and then the extension, which is the tgz file, right? It's a tgz file of our package. So I'll quickly copy this from here. And now what I want to do is simply publish it to NPM, because I have a package which is of my own workspace, which means that it's not going to conflict over the internet, and I have everything ready inside that. So let's go and publish it to NPM. Before you publish, make sure that you're logged in, otherwise this will simply throw an error and you might not understand why that is happening. So npm publish, and then let's go to dist / whatever is the path, ng-lib I believe / the name of your package, right? And the one more thing that you need to do here is that since you want to, maybe I'm not sure if you would want to do it publicly or, access, just publish it for your private usage, you can specify the access flag here. So in this case, the access is, let's call it access equals, or just call it access public. So npm publish, then the path to your library package. So it would be inside the dist folder, then the, whatever library name that you've given, and the name of your package. So to confirm, let's go back to the code and see dist, the name of our library, and the name of our package that is generated, which is Nishu Goel -ng-lib the version.tgz file. So yeah, and the access should be public because I want to publish my library publicly. So it should be available to everyone.
I'm sorry, Nishu. Sorry to take you back a bit. I think I got lost. I think there's a place where you were changing the name of the NPM package.
Mm-hmm. All right.
There's a place where you're changing the name of the NPM package, like you're preparing your username.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if you could take us back to that place, then we can just continue.
Yeah.
Sorry to take you back.
Sure. Let's do that again. Yeah, so the reason why we change the name of our library is because there are multiple libraries out there, right? And we always want to make sure that our library exists inside our workspace. And to give you a very good example of this, you might have noticed that the Angular repository is inside the Angular package is inside the Angular workspace. So it's called @Angular / Angular. Similarly on GitHub, that you would notice it is @Angular / Angular. That means that inside the Angular workspace, you have this tool or this, whatever library or the package as whatever name that you're giving. So even if I give this famous name to this here, right? Even if I give my library the name Angular, it would still be accessible. It would still be available because now it is inside my workspace, right? And if I don't have a package already with this name, then I can totally go ahead and do that. So let's just go back here. So this is why we would want to change the name of our library and keep it our name specific, our account specific. And let's look at how we did that. So let's go back to, let's close project first of all so that you are able to understand it better. Now let's first of all go to the package.json of our library, not the built library, but the whole library that we have created. So if we open projects, we have the consuming application, which we don't need to go to as of now, but we need to go to the library, which is ng-lib. So let's go inside that. And now we see that we have this package.json file, which contains the information of the name of the library, of the version of the libraries, and of any peer dependency that the library contains. So let's go to that and look at the name, right? So you notice that the name was this earlier. Now we have changed the name from here. The reason being that we want to give this name for this library inside our workspace. Any questions until here?
No. It's okay.
Awesome. So yeah, then we give the version if you want to change it. If you have the same version as before, which is 0.0.1, since it would be the first initial throw of your library, you can give the version accordingly. When you have that done, the next step is to just going back here. Okay, this should be 1.0.0, right? When you have this done, you would need to build your library again, because this is what you have done in the library package, right? The library, the local changes inside your library, but you have not built it. So the package that your library, that is folder contains, is still the old one that was with the name only ng-lib. So you would need to build your library again, so that inside the this folder, the package.json now contains the latest name of your library. Otherwise, if you don't build it right and you just change it inside your package.json of ng-lib, it would not have this new name for your library, but have the old name only because you've not built it again.
Okay.
So to ensure that it is updated with the latest changes, we would build it again. And then once we have built it, we would want a new package which is in the name of our latest name of our library. So we would build it again in the process. So that's why we do the building process and the, the packing process again. And the reason I showed you in parts by, simply giving a common name here and then changing the name to our own workspace had this reason to ensure that, you understand why if you just give a, popular name for your library which you want, it's better to keep it inside your own workspace so that it doesn't conflict. So does that answer your question, Wayne?
Yeah. So just after this step is you run npm run build lib and then npm run pack lib.
Exactly. So after I've changed the name, I would simply go to the terminal. I would want to build the library again, which is npm run, the same build script that we used earlier, npm run build lib. Once that builds the new library that I have, then I would want to simply pack my library again, the package again.
Okay.
So I would do npm run pack lib, right? All right. So now that I had the package here in this name, in the latest name, I wanted to publish it to NPM. And since I was already logged into NPM, I was able to do that using the npm publish command. And then you can't simply give the package name because you need to give the path to it locally. So this is what the path to your package is. Npm publish your package and whatever access that that you're trying to give to your library. If you give it private, it would ask you to have the paid membership, I believe, for publishing the private packages. So yeah, it seems that we were successful at that, and now I have this library over NPM. That sounds interesting. So let's go to NPM, open the browser here. Let's go to NPM.
So did you do something like about access, public access or something?
So you see this command, npm publish, the name of my and the path of my folder, package folder, and then the access public flag. This ensures that library is published publicly. All right, so let's go to npm. It seems that I would have to sign in again here. Okay, I'm signed in. Now let's go to the packages. I should have this new package which is called Nishu Goel /nglib @1.0.0, which is the first version of my library in here. So 6 minutes ago, right? You see at @Nishu Goel /nglib, this library has just been created for me, and this was generated using Angular CLI, and it works like all the other libraries. It is inside my workspace. It is the way to install it is simply using npm I or npm install and the name of my library. And yeah, just like other libraries, right? And the collaborators, which is me because I have published it as my account. So yeah, that's the building process and publishing it to npm. Any questions until here? Was anyone able to publish their own library to their npm?
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yeah.
So in case maybe I want to update into a different version, so I'll just have to again change the version, then rebuild, then pack it again.
Actually, yes. So if you go here, right, you would simply be able to change the version from your, not the disk folder. Let's go here. Yeah. So you can just increase the patch version to it, or let's keep it the same, or the minor version to it. And every time you publish your library with a new patch change or a minor change to your library, you can simply, change it from here, the version to your library, and then publish it again. So the build, obviously you'll have to do it again, because if you have any changes code wise in your library, you would have to rebuild it and repack it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I'll come back to my question, asking that if anybody was able to publish their own library to their own NPM account until now.
Yes, I was able to.
Oh, who's that? Wayne, is it?
Yes, Wayne, yeah.
Oh, that's great. That is awesome. You should share it on, over the internet that you created your own library today. That is awesome.
Yeah, sure. I will definitely. Thank you.
Now, there's one more step left actually. We have published our library, but we don't know how to use it inside any consuming application. Does it work as simply as it works for any other Angular or maybe just a library that we use from over the internet? For example, you want any library and you simply install it and you can import the module or the component and then you're able to use it simply, right? So let's try to do that. Does our library help us solve that? So I copied this from here and okay, let's go back all the changes that we did here. Not that many, right? So these were the changes, right? Now the next thing for me to do is to be able to use my library that I created inside my consuming application. So all right, let's go to the terminal. Let's clear all this. We don't want to see all that. Now the next thing that I need to go do is to go inside the project and be able to install this library that we have created. So it will obviously install at the root package.json because that's the workspace package.json. So let's just paste it here, which is npm I copied it from npm where they specify how to install a particular library. So yeah, let's go to the terminal and that's where I specify npm I @angular Nishu Goel /ng-lib. Let's try to install that and see if it works properly. In the meantime, let's just close all these files because we don't need those anymore. Let's close the disk folder, which is the library package, which we have already published to NPM. But we need the projects folder. Inside that, we need the consuming application. We also need to have a look at the package.json if our new library is installed inside our application. Well, it seems that it has added a package and it has also removed the package. Remember which package it removed? The local file package that we had inside our the one that we locally used it, right? File colon and then the name of our package. All right, so it seems to have installed and this is the name. So let's search for it inside our code. Let's go to the root package.json and see if we have something from npm coming in. And there we see that we have our library inside our package.json in the name whichever you gave to your own library. In my case, it is @Nishu Goel / the name of my library and the version that I published, right? So yeah, we have that here. Now we should be able to use this library inside our component. So let's go in here and let's go inside the app folder. Let's go inside the app module.ts. Inside this, now I want to import from my library that I've installed @Nishu Goel. So it shows here, which means it has successfully configured. Now I want to use any module, right? We are inside the module, so we'll import the module, right? And the name of our module should be something called ng-lib module. And there we see we have the suggestion here, ng-lib module, right? So let's just copy it, and if you are already working in Angular, you would know that when we import anything, any module, we need to add it to the imports array to ensure that this is being used inside our component, right? So we have it inside the imports array, we have ng-lib module. Now we should be able to use the ng-lib component inside our component.html, right? So let's just remove all the default HTML which was here. We don't need that anymore. We just want to see, let's just use a simple div and a simple hello, and then let's call it value, right? And then we want to use the selector of our library, whatever we were exporting from our component. So now this is the time when we want to recall what is the name that we gave to our component. Well, it was called something like ng-lib component, right? And the selector to it, if you don't remember, I remember, but if you don't remember, you can simply go to your library project or to the libraries project, whichever library that you're using from any other author. You can go to that. You can have a look at the name. So let's go inside the project, which is ng-lib. Let's go to the src folder. Let's go to the lib folder. Let's simply have a look at the selector here. So you see what is the selector? this is the selector that you're going to use on the HTML inside your consuming application. So let me close this quickly, and let's use the name of our selector, and this is closing here now. And what do we expect? This should give the whatever text we had written inside our HTML, right? So if I go back to the library again and look at the component, okay, so we were saying hello from Angular Kenya now. Now let's close it again. We have it inside our, we have two things basically. It should say welcome, and it should import whatever is coming from our library, right? So I'll go back to the terminal now, go inside my project, inside my consuming application, and inside my consuming application, and now I simply want to run my application. So a simple ng serve. Let's see if something comes in from the library now. It is trying to run it. So you see, it's taking all the bundles of the library that's built locally, and it's like, you know, using those as ESM 2015 bundle. All the configuration in the compiling process is happening. In the meantime, I would also like to tell you the other selectors that you can use. For example, I mean the other properties that you can use from your library. So you didn't just export the component, but you also exported the service, right? So you can also use the service. So if you go back to the ng-lib here and look at your service, right? So you have this ng-lib service. So if you want to use the service inside your component, so let's go to the consuming application now. Let's just take this name from here. Close this, consuming application, http app.component.ts. Inside this, you can just inject that service that you have coming in from the library, right? So inside this, you can just give it an instance of your library. My lib service is what we call it, and then the name of your service. This is what you would like to import from your library, right? You can see there are different versions from where you can install it. Import it, but you want to do it from the just the name of your library. So you don't have to specify /public API file, though it shows that, but you have it as the entry file to your application. So this should totally work. You're getting the name of your service, you're getting it from the library, not any specific file, and then you are creating it as an instance of that service. And then now you can, you know, wherever you wish to, you can simply use this instance and, you know, interact with the methods inside that service and be able to communicate with whatever is defined in the service. So yeah, let's not save this, but let's have a look at what is happening in the compilation process. This seems to have compiled. Let's go back to the browser. Let's go to not the React one, but Angular one. Port 00. Awesome. So as you can see, you have this welcome here. Let me expand this a bit. Where did you go? Right. This is better, right? Okay, so as you can see, you have welcome here from what we printed on the HTML. And then we didn't print anything, but we had the library instance here, which is lib ng-lib. And as you can see, you have this text coming from your library. So this particular space that this text is using is your library space. So even if you had a color picker component here, that would appear here, and that's not a part of your Angular application, but that's coming from the library. So yeah, that's Angular libraries. You saw how to create Angular libraries, how to build those, how you can, you know, package it and use it locally. You also saw that, you know, how you can package it, publish it to NPM, install it from there, use it in your consuming application, and be able to see the output. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Wow. Thank you very much, Nishu. Personally, I was just checking it out. Yeah, feeling so happy. But yeah, thank you. I'd like to open the floor to questions. If anyone has questions.
Sure, I'll just end this with a few resources that I have, and then we can take all the questions that we can have. I would love to have questions related to this. So yeah, this is the GitHub repository of how to create a library. I put this here so that, you know, put it there so that you can have a reference to it, because I understand that 1 hour or a 2 hour session is not enough to follow along, and there might be a lot of things that you might be missing out on. There might be a lot of questions that are coming to your head, but you can't ask that in the process of doing this. Then I've created another repository actually, which shows you how to consume a library, just in case you don't know that or you're struggling with that. So yeah, and these are some great resources to follow when you're building your library and publishing it to NPM. And if you want to dive deeper into what libraries actually do. So for example, if you want to know how ng-packagr used to work before Angular CLI, automated this for you, and everything is done by Angular CLI now. But if you are somebody who's interested in the local setup of things, do it by yourself, manual setup. That's when you will want to know a lot about ng-packagr. So all of that is mentioned here. First is obviously the documentation. Then there's this Angular library series on Angular in depth, which is very interesting. There's like I think a set of 5 articles, a series of 5 articles. So that tells you about publishing it, that tells you about creating it. Then there's this full course about structuring Angular application with Angular libraries by Fabian Gozebring, and this is really interesting, a course if you are really invested into learning what Angular libraries help you with. And this talk I've already mentioned about, so this is again a good resource for you to follow a lot about Angular libraries. And yeah, this is a blog by myself which I gave to you to follow along with me if you're like getting stuck anywhere. So yeah, that's pretty much it, and you can take a snapshot of this particular resource section if you're interested, but I'll obviously share the slides with you. And yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nishu, once again. Thank you very much. Does anyone have a question? Please just unmute yourself and ask any question. Please, just ask any question. Don't feel shy or anything. Just ask.
Okay, whoever, do ask your question, and I'll make you meet my rabbit. I have a pet rabbit, and it's really excited to meet you all, so I can introduce that to you.
Okay, let me just ask as we wait for someone else too. So my question is with regards to the, I think it's on the package.json file. Is it like keywords, especially like build lib and pack lib? Are they keywords that are inside the package.json, or those are just like words you can just build lib and pack lib?
Right, so that is a configuration in the ng-packagr. Now, when you integrate ng-packagr with Angular CLI, that's when you have to specify that the lib path will be this particular path, or the destination path of your, the build folder, which is the interface to your library, is going to be this. So those are the keywords which are configured for ng-packagr, and ng-packagr understands those to be able to configure your library and ng-packagr with that. There was one more file, right? Entry file. So that also is the configuration and the conventional name used by ng-packagr, and that helps you to define the entry file. In this case, public API.ts file. Is that what your question is?
Yeah. Okay, and so for example, if someone is building just like a very basic package, and let's just like add numbers or multiply numbers, where do they write their logic? Do they write their logic in the model, in the component.ts file, or are they writing it in their service file?
Okay, so this totally depends on how you want to, treat your Angular component and your Angular service. So for example, there is something that is reusable, and many of your components want to use it inside your library. Now the demo that I showed right now was just an example of one Angular component inside a library. But the idea of creating a library is to have multiple components. Otherwise, we can just create a web component, right? And there's no need to create a whole library. So yeah, you would have multiple components, and the situation where the need for some functionality comes in where multiple components need that. For example, a login component and a register component, right, which is coming from your library. Let's just assume that, and there needs to be a communication between the register component and the login component, and that's when you would want to use the service to do the HTTP operations, for example. And you would really prefer to keep that code inside the service, because there are two components relying on that. There are two components who need to communicate through the service. And that's when you would keep that code inside the service. However, if there's some business logic code which is just specific to a component, for example, a color picker component, like I mentioned before. So yeah, you can just put that logic inside the color picker .component.ts file, and you don't need to keep that logic inside the service at all if that's very specific to the component that you're using. So that's more related to the Angular side of things than Angular library, because it totally depends on how you want to architecture your components, services,
Okay. So if I may ask, do you have like packages that probably you use from time to time that you've built it on your own?
I didn't understand. Can you repeat?
Sorry. Have you built packages on your own, and probably you use them from time to time in your projects?
So libraries, not really. I've built a lot of web components before that I use in my personal projects, and it really helps me. For example, the previous setting that I used to work in at my workplace, it was more like a garage setup. And what that meant was that, we would work with multiple frameworks. Now, there are components that, which are very reusable, and we need to use them either, maybe I'm working with Angular or when I'm working with React, right? So that's when I really don't want to write the functionality twice for a particular feature. And that's when I prefer that I would just build it as a web component, as a custom element, and publish it to maybe NPM or an internal repository where you want to keep all your components. So yeah, that's what I used to do with my web components, use it inside React by building it and then using it on my own, but not really a library, because library can have multiple components and you really need to have a good feature for your library to be able to publish it to NPM or just use it for your own purpose. But it's totally reliable, and you can create your own library for a very small feature also and use it inside your project.
Okay. I think Kevin Muya has a question. Kevin, you can ask.
Yes. There are some libraries out there that someone can be able to add properties at the module level. How would you go about that?
I'm not sure if I understood the question. I'll just repeat it to ensure that I understood it right. So you mentioned that there are many libraries out there which have different modules, and how do I go about that? Is that the question?
No. So I've imported the library in my let's say I've imported the library. Then it requires me to add a customized probably setting, like let's say something that can generally affect the library itself. So I'm trying to look for an example to be able to explain myself. I don't know. Someone else can ask a question just for a second as I look for somewhere I've used it before.
Sure. If you're talking about like overriding the features inside a library, the most commonly used example of that is the overriding the styles, right? And a lot of people do that, and a library should be configured actually in a way that it's totally you can override that very easily. For example, I go for a library, for example material UI, right? And I want to use it inside my application. Now my application has a particular standard for whatever styles that I want to use inside my application, whatever the border color should be, for example, if we talk about the styling perspective. And that's when I want to really make sure that even if I'm using React table, for example, as a library, or just a different library from material UI, material UI as a library, those two have different styles of their own, but my application can't afford that, right? Because I want to have one theme across the application. And that's when the need of overriding the styles really comes into picture, because I want to ensure that either if I'm using React table or even if I'm using just material UI, I want the styles of maybe two input boxes to be exactly same. And that's when I would want to override the styles from the library. And that's totally configurable, and that totally depends on how you configure your library. and that, which is why we say that it's really important to configure your library in a way that the user can customize it, and the user can customize the styles, so that's when it becomes user friendly, right? So yeah, that's the idea. Does that answer your question, Kelvin?
Yes, it does. Do you have any libraries you've used to customize?
Oh yes, a lot of those actually, and I've been doing this recently a lot, and I would sometimes scratch my head while trying to override a library, because it becomes difficult sometimes to find the exact the selector that you're trying to override. And the most used example of me doing it personally is the material UI library, and I've done this a lot. For example, the avatar component inside the material UI library, I would have to override that a lot of times. The input component inside the material library. So I can quickly show that to you if you're interested. Yeah, right. So let's go to material UI input field. Right. So you see there are different styles available inside this input box. For example, let's look at this outline component, text field component, and I wanted to ensure that when I click on this, I should not have this outline which is going inside the outline, and it is taking the space there. So this is not as per what I wanted in my application. So I had to configure it, ensuring that I remove this thing from here. I change the border color, and you can easily do that. I'll show you. They have also mentioned how we can easily do that. If I open the code here, so it also depends a lot on the library's documentation, which is why there's this saying that whenever you're building your library, make sure that whatever code that you're writing is as good as the library documentation, because for the user, the end user who's using your library, the major thing is to understand what is in the library, and then only he'll be able to use it. Otherwise, for somebody who's not able to understand what a library contains, they would install it, they would see if it's working. Mostly it will not. If you're not reading the documentation, you would remove it, uninstall it, and then search for another library. We do that a lot, right? I've done that a lot, to be honest. So we need to read the library documentation properly, and you see that this is a great documentation here, right? And like I'm not sponsored by Material UI or anywhere, but I just like this, so I'm mentioning that. So yeah, you can see here the way they have mentioned how you can override the styles of the library that you're using. So you would just give the whatever selector. For example, this is for the root the root selector of whatever input component this is. So you can always inspect that and see whatever is the name of the selector, then use it here, define your own styles, and it will override the styles of the library. So yeah, that's how I've been doing this quite a lot, and you can override the styles of a library. Did that answer your question, Kelvin?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I think I also have an example on my side. I think I was using, I think it was Angular material, and there were different parts that I really wanted to tweak. I didn't want it to have the default colors, for example. I wanted it to have colors that correspond to what the client needed as user requirements. So like I had to, if you want also, you can do like inspecting elements and all that, just to see what you can what exactly to pinpoint at, for example, to change the color or to change how, for example, the button looks like and all that. So yeah, based on that question, I think yeah, it's very easy to do that, as long as the library allows you to override it in one way or the other.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting question, because I've seen a lot of people, including myself, struggle with overriding the styles of a library and ensuring that it works exactly the way we want to. Any more questions do we have?
Anyone else wants the question? Dennis?
Okay, so from me, this amazing stuff. So my question is to Wayne. There's a couple of friends of mine who were not able to join, so they're wondering how they're going to access this specific video.
Okay, so after this, I'll just compile the video through Microsoft Streams, and then I'll upload it on a YouTube channel. So I think by tomorrow I should have it up on our YouTube channel. But just let them know to just follow the our Twitter account, where we'll be tweeting when the upload is done. Yeah, so they'll be able to access the recording. Yeah.
So I have a question.
Sure.
Is the library that is built, so is it compiled in just in time or ahead of time?
Always ahead of time. So this is a library requirement that your library should always be AOT compilation ready. That's a must that we specified in the, what all a library should be. So always AOT compilation ready. Even before, AOT was by default, even then it was a like a mandate that a library should be AOT compilation ready. And we also will be soon able to, publish IV libraries to NPM. So, like right now we don't have that, but we are soon going to have that as per the Angular roadmap.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Saurabh?
Yeah.
Anyone else was a question before we close it off? Okay, Nishu, would you want to show us something?
Yeah, it's just here. It's waiting to be introduced to all of you. Oops. Yeah, you can say hi to this rabbit. Yeah,
Hi.
Hi, everyone.
It's just good space to all of you. And now, yeah, just say bye, Pikachu. Okay, it wants to run. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Nishu. It was amazing having you here. Just about how to all about NPM libraries. Personally, on my end, I've really learned a lot on how to build NPM packages. Initially, I thought that to build something like a library or you just need to, I don't know, like it has to go through some series of checks before it's approved for public consumption and all that. But it's actually something new that I've learned that is actually you can just build it and then just deploy it and then let it be used by anyone else. Yeah, so I hope that this will be one of the many times that we'll be able to build our own packages, maybe for our personal work or organizational purposes, or even just general purposes. I hope this will be one of the many ways. Please, if you have an opportunity, we'll share the resources that Nishu will share with us. So you can always just check on it. Also follow along on your own during your own time, so you can be able to build a library of your own, something that you can actually showcase out there. By the way, this is something amazing for you even to showcase even on your portfolio that I actually built an NPM library for Angular applications. Yeah, not many people do that because people might think like, oh, it's too hard or it's too complex. But actually, when you get to understand the basics, it's easy for you to just build on from there. So yeah, I'd like to say thank you, Nishu. Do you have any last words for the people, for the community?
No, I would like to really thank you all for joining in. I'm not sure what time this is for you, but I'm so happy that all of you joined, and it always feels good to interact. It's sad that we can't connect in person, but still we are able to. I mean, I'm happy about the fact that we are still able to connect somehow. And the one thing that I would like to mention is that if you understood it well and you were able to follow it along, I would love to see all of your libraries that you create and publish it to NPM, or just don't publish and let me know that you've created your library. So it would be a great feedback for me to see that. That's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and maybe next year, if probably we good financially and all that, we'll definitely have you come over to Kenya if we have a summit of sorts. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. As usual, we'll have the recording available for everyone by tomorrow. So please just check in with our YouTube channel by tomorrow, or also just follow our Twitter account where we'll be providing updates. Once again, thank you, Nishu. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and I wish you all a good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.